Hi, and welcome back to Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Euler. I'm your host, Brad Wilder. Today on the show, John Euler and Paul Dohse are here. John getting set to talk with Paul all about a topic that, well, goes unnoticed and misunderstood throughout most of humanity. We're going to clue you in, and it's something that's super deviant, something that is super devastating to kids as well. We'll be back with more on furries here on Unmasking the Trans Movement right after these.
Join Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Euler as he hosts Unmasking the Trans Movement's next webinar, where we connect you with the clinical professionals who provide understanding on the many topics that make up this disturbing ideology and answer any questions you may have. Protecting the most vulnerable, women and children. Unmasking the Trans Movement. For more info on guests, dates, times, and pricing, see us online at unmaskingthetransmovement.com.
Hi, and welcome back. Today, John Euler, Paul Dohse, and myself sitting down because, well, this next topic is something that is truly deviant. There are many forms of deviancy these days, and one such topic and issue that isn't discussed enough is the furry movement. Now, based on Wikipedia's evaluation of what this all is, they'll paint it to be, rosy and great, and the kids should participate. But the truth is, this deviant furry fandom is a subculture interested in anthropomorphic animal characters. Examples, attributes include, exhibiting human intelligence and facial expressions, speaking, walking on two legs, and wearing clothes. The term furry fandom is also used to refer to the community of people who gather on the internet at furry conventions. They have conventions? Okay, we're going to get into this. The furry fandom has its roots in the underground comic movement of the 70s, a genre of comic books that depicts explicit content. That's how they bring the kids in. Then in 1976, a pair of cartoonists created the Amateur Press Association Voodie, which was dedicated to animal-focused art. Oh, it's just art. It's just for the kids. It'll be fun. Well, many of its featured works contained adult themes, such as Omaha, the Cat Dancer, which, contained explicit sex, period. Voodie grew a small following over the next several years, and its contributors began meeting at, science fiction and comic conventions. Oh, that's a great place to go with your sexual deviance. Take it to the kids. Well, according to fandom historian Fred Patton, the concept of furry originated at a science fiction convention back in 1980 when a character drawing from Steve Gallacci's Albedo Anthropomorphics stated discussion of anthropomorphic characters in science fiction novels. So what does that all mean? Well, don't worry, I got the experts here. They're standing by. Now, this led to the formation of a discussion group that met at science fiction conventions and comic conventions. So the specific term furry fandom was being used, in fanzines, fantasies too for that matter, as early as 1983, and had become the standard name for the genre by the mid-1990s, when it was defined as the organized appreciation and dissemination of art and prose regarding furries, or fictional mammalian anthropomorphic characters. Who writes this stuff? However, fans consider the origins of furry fandom to be much earlier, with fictional works such as Kimba, the White Lion, released back in 1965, Richard Adams' novel Watership Down, published in 1972, and 1978's film adaptation of it as well. And even Disney's Robin Hood as an oft-cited example. So, again, Disney, you hear that name a lot these days. They're in the mix, and they always have been. The deviance runs deep, and I'm not so sure that Walt himself was as deviant as the people that he surrounded himself with. The internet newsgroup discussion in the 90s created some separation between fans of furry animal characters and furry characters, and it was meant to avoid the baggage that was associated with the term furry. Well, during the 1980s, furry fans began to push fanzines developing a diverse social group that eventually began to schedule social gatherings. And by 1989, there was sufficient interest to stage the first furry convention. So, it was called Conference O. O for orgasm? I don't know. It was held at the Holiday Inn in Bristol Plaza, Costa Mesa, California, okay? Now, the next decade, the internet became accessible, and, well, the general population became the most popular means for furry fans to socialize. Here is the start. No, I shouldn't say the start, but a more aggressive tactic by this group to start to address your kids and how playful and fun this all is. The news group alt.fan.furry was created in November 1990, and virtual environments such as Mux also became popular places on the internet for fans to meet and communicate. Now, this is a side you want to see. This isn't a side you want to see. What's really needing to be unmasked here today? Well, let's bring in our professional experts, John Euler, LPC, and today's special guest, Paul Dohse, who have, well, a lot to go over with regards to this disturbing topic. John, welcome to the program today.
Brad, thank you. That was an outstanding introduction as far as what is furries? Why are we even talking about this? Who's even ever heard of furries? Well, I had never heard of furries, but I'm so pleased that Paul Dohse has been willing to join us. Paul has written the book on furries. Brad, you read a huge portion as far as a good background. Paul has done a deep dive, and here's his book. We've got Fake Fandom, the Furrie Fandom sect, and it goes on to say its origins, anti-human ideology, and imminent danger to children. And that is why we are going to talk about this, because we are all about protecting the vulnerable here. And little would anyone know that this thing called furries poses a significant danger to kids. And I had never heard about furries until working on psych staff doing sex offender treatment in the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections from 2005 to 2016. And that is when I encountered a disclosure about furries. And the inmates kind of got a kick out of that because I had this look on my face like, furries? And they said, Mr. Euler, you need to get out more often, number one. I said, okay, that may be true, but what? They said, you've never heard of furries? And I said, no, I've never heard of furries. I said, what are furries? They said, well, like big mascot costumes like at Disneyland or sporting events. I said, yeah. They said, well, no, there's groups. I said, oh, okay. He said, you're still not catching on, are you? I said, no. He said, well, it's amazing how if you hide your identity, you either make yourself up to appear, maybe like a woman, or you dress where 100% of your identity is covered. It's amazing how parents will just hand their kids to you. Yeah. And this was a man, a very heinous pedophile. And that is when I knew I had to start looking into what is this furry thing, since pedophiles were saying that it's one of their most effective means of accessing kids. So I started doing some research, and that is when Paul and our paths crossed. So Paul, welcome, because you felt compelled to do a deep dive into furries. And we're just going to do a disclaimer for the audience, but this is such an important topic. Be mindful if you have young kids right now in close proximity, you might want to get them busy with something else. But all parents and good adults, protective adults, need to understand this because it is a massive thing. And they count on adults being ignorant of this, not being aware. And it is growing. It's growing by leaps and bounds. And this is something that for child protection, we really need to understand, and why it fits into the our topic of unmasking the trans movement is that furries and the trans movement and many things that have converged all come together, and you're going to find a emergence of kids that are involved in the trans movement and kids that are involved in furries and anime art, hentai. We're going to go into all that. Paul, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Well, let's first, Paul, give an introduction of yourself and where people can get a hold of you and where they can find your book, because by the time we are finished, here's your book. I wrote the foreword. I was privileged. Paul, you asked me to write the foreword. So by the time we're finished, people are going to want to contact you to get this book, to get better educated, because this whole movement is even now getting into churches. It's into schools. It's everywhere, and it appears harmless, but it is anything but that. So tell people where they can contact you, get your book, and then tell us what prompted you. How did you get involved in furries?
Well, I guess my book can be found on Shopify. And if they just Google Paul Dohse, Dohse, Fake Fandom, there should be links there that'll take them to the Shopify link. But the book can be found on Shopify. Just probably enter in my name as the author and it'll come up. Another thing that people can do, if they want to email me at pmd at inbox.com, as several people have, I would be more than willing to give them information and links to where they can buy the books. So my involvement with the furries began with a custody case. My wife and I were attempting to obtain custody of a relative, and the parents were fighting us, and we had a conference with our attorney, and one of the parents in a statement, because there were, what do you call them when what do you call it when an attorney makes somebody come into their office and give statements?
Yeah, you were subpoenaed, and
yeah,
that's compelled.
So
that's right.
Through some kind of records, the father identified as a furry, and my attorney was like, "What's a furry?" I'm like, "I don't know." So I'm a researcher to begin with. I've been the director of a research institute that researches philosophy and the history of religion and stuff. So I went home and researched it. One thing led to another, and I was pretty amazed at what my research found. Also, I would like to note that the young relative that we're talking about here to this day has very deep problems, and from time to time, we hear what those issues are from his counselors and other family members. And over and over and over again, the people counseling him really don't know what to do with him. Okay. But everything that's shared with me, I'm like, yeah, that's in chapter 3. Oh yeah, that's that. I mean, everything that is being shared about him as far as counseling issues, I can point to a specific place in the book that flows out of. Okay. So,
matter of fact, Paul, if you might, would you read the chapter headings And Paul, my apologies, right? Your last name is Dohse.
That's all right.
You right? So my apologies for the mispronunciation. Would you just for the viewer, would you read the chapter headings so they can get a sense of, yeah, this is not just a mild little book. You did a deep dive into, but it's small enough. It's very readable, right? It's you can read it in once, well, right, a couple hours, but give people a sense of the chapter headings so they know where we're heading, or where we're heading for this discussion.
Well, I'm thinking about it, and the problem with this issue is there's so much. The movement has its hands in so many different things, and there's so many different angles. One of the reasons that it's difficult to hold this movement accountable is it's got a lot of tentacles. Okay. But I want to hit on something that Brad said that he read from the Wikipedia about anthropomorphic art, right? Okay. So I would like to read something here. Oh, okay. So the point I want to make about the movement is a lot of things about the movement that are put out there as harmless, this is just, silly, happy-go-lucky, people dressed up as animals, children love them, doling out hugs to everyone in the world,
As a matter of fact, Paul, as you're talking, what I'm going to do is this, so that people can kind of get a sense. I'm going to bring up for them, first of all, this is my Twitter page. Right. So we have in the background. I'm going to scroll down so everybody kind of mind your eyes. So I'm not necessarily doing this to promote my page, but we have an article. Redux just did an article, or Redux, I'm sorry. I'm actually featured in this, but they're showing how there's people in there that do human trafficking, and you have a lot of sexual abuse going on. But I'm going to scroll down. We're going to talk about Canada had to revisit a bestiality bill to close some loopholes. Interesting. Now, I'll show you where I'm going with this, which is, there's more about the deviants. Here, as a matter of fact, a man that's receiving a blowjob by another man, and he's in a furry costume.
Right.
Okay. There's a lot of deviants, shows sex offenders, but I'm going down. The shooter in the Christian school turns out was very involved in furries, so it's very destabilizing. We're going to talk about bestiality, what they call zoophiles, but here's what I wanted people to see. Okay, notice that in this CBS News article, 7,600 hotel rooms for Anthrocon sells out in just hours. 7,600 hotel rooms. Okay,
for what year?
This is this year. So this is Pittsburgh.
Wow.
Right? So as a matter of fact, let me see.
So all we have to do is lock down the hotels once they're full, and we're set, aren't we? We can just turn them into jails right then and there.
I'm telling you. Now, let me ask this. Did the screen just change? Do you all see?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So here it is. Anthrocon sells, right, all the hotel rooms. Tell you what, that's what we need to do there. Okay. So, and it originated in Pittsburgh. So Paul's going to tell us kind of that connection. Okay. But over 7,600 contracted rooms sold out after reservations opened February 2nd. This is 2023. And then it said it made an extra 1,800 rooms available. Okay, it's scheduled June 29th through July 2nd, and it's expected to attract almost 10,000 people, bringing in an estimated total of $10.8 million. This is a significant thing. I don't know what else, aside from the Super Bowl, sells out that many rooms that quickly.
Well, and I go into this in the book, their influence over and in the city of Pittsburgh is vast. And, you know, I also talk in the book about Morning Joe. And I think the guy's wife, her name is Mika. They were going over a chlorine gas attack at a furry conference, and they were reporting on it. And once they got into the report, and Mika started picking up on what the furries were and this, that, and the other, she couldn't contain herself and had to leave the set. She was just cracking up laughing.
I remember seeing that. That's right.
Right.
That's right.
So
it was on the news. They're reporting about furries. That's right. They think it's funny.
Right. One of the things, people look at the whole furry movement and they just can't take it seriously. You know, a threat to children? Oh, come on. Okay. But here's what we're missing. And getting back to, I was struck by what Brad read in the Wikipedia article. Here's a lot of overt things. Now, in the book, what you just shared on your Twitter page, good stuff, in a matter of speaking. You know what I mean. But people point to that no matter how much of it there is, or the stats. The first thing out of their mouth is, that's just a few bad apples in the movement. That's just a small segment of the movement. Now, I attack that in a whole chapter in the book through studies and showing, no, that's not a small percentage of the movement. That's 90% of the movement, if not more. But here's some overt things. And most of my book focuses on the ideologies and its beginning history, its genesis, that all of these behaviors flow from. Okay. But one thing I write on page 10, I got a quotation here. The point here follows. Art often has a direct connection to a philosophy and is the expression of that philosophy. Anthropomorphism may be one of the best examples of that. Anthropomorphism may be one of the, anthropomorphic art is the expression of anthropomorphism, which is a deep philosophical and religious subject. Come now, if one of our children expressed an interest in satanic art and therefore joined a satanic fandom, we would only have concerns. We would have no concerns whatsoever beyond the artistic aspect. It's ridiculous. So that's the example that I give. And I think people don't know what we're really saying when the furry fandom focuses on anthropomorphism, like that shouldn't raise red flags in and of itself. That tag right there, that label tells you that it goes far beyond the art itself.
Let me also I'm going to bring parents along with us, as it were. Now, okay. I'm going to help people become really engaged for purposes of really opening eyes. And yeah. if you're an average person, you're listening to us and you're saying, well, I still don't get this. What's the big deal about people dressing in big costumes? Okay. We saw how many rooms filled up, how quickly.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, if you own a hotel, you tell me how you fill almost 10,000 rooms within 24 hours. That's a big deal. Yeah. I don't know anything else that can do that, quite frankly. Okay.
Right. And so the whole thing with the mascot type animal costumes, what's the big deal? It's fun. It's like having Halloween every day, right? Well, the question's got to be for discerning parents, why do they dress up like that? Where's this coming from? What drives it? Every action has an ideology behind it. And Brad had mentioned Voodoo. What was Voodoo? What was that publication in the beginning that the fandom eventually flowed out of? Well, Voodoo was an anti-humanity. One of its banners was "No humans allowed." It was an anti-humanity counterculture publication. Okay, one of the guidelines for submitting an article to that publication is it couldn't include reason. Okay, no reason allowed, no human reason allowed. So basically, what you have is a movement that is, and we can speak to self-esteem, but basically the whole thing with dressing up like animals is the whole idea that it's better to be an animal than a human. Okay. And I get into all of the religious part of it, about children being guided by their inner spirit animal, so on and so forth. One specific case that I know of is of a child who was, Lucky the raccoon. Okay. And he had taken on this identity. All right. And Lucky the raccoon had superpowers. And his parents, who were also furries, were teaching them this as well. He very antisocial at school because he was superior in that he was being led by Lucky the raccoon, or his spirit animal, which was Lucky the raccoon. Therefore, he was superior to normal humans. And this is a child, right? So this is, and it's hard to get in the weeds because there's so many tentacles here, but this movement is many things. It's an anti-humanity movement. It's a sex cult. It's attacks a child's self-esteem. If you would rather be an animal than yourself, that's not a good thing, right? We don't want our children to have that mindset. That is not going to be healthy. So, what makes this a danger is the ideologies that it's founded on, and all of these things that flow out of the basic ideologies.
And Paul, there's such parallels between the trans movement and furries for exactly what reason you just described. We have queer theory, but what's interesting...
Excuse me, I'm sorry, let me interrupt.
Yeah.
You got to know that in their early history, the furry movement was trans before trans was cool. Okay?
Yeah,
like the old country song. Everything, like I say in the book, everything that we are saying today, and I stand by this statement, everything that we're saying in our culture today with trans and many other things, furries were the forerunners of that. Absolutely. A lot of this.
There we go. Now, I want to set the stage because we're going to start to reveal why parents should be concerned, because I can even still kind of sense there may be a parent saying, well, still, it's just dressing up. It's just cat ears. It's a tail. Kids will be kids. And okay. So I want to set the stage. I want the viewers to think in terms of this. What comes to mind when you hear that maybe an office is having a team building exercise. Let's say a branch of an office. We're going to have a division. They're going to try to enhance team collective spirit, right? Businesses do this. So we're going to go have an experience somewhere. So let's say you're married to a guy, you're happily married, but you hear that he says, honey, hey, my boss says we're going to do a team thing. I kind of have to go. Oh, where are you going? Well, it's being held in Las Vegas. Yeah, he wants to. Oh, why Las Vegas? Well, apparently better room accommodations, cheaper rates. And what are you going to do there? Well, during the day, we've got these. Then we're breakout sessions. Then we're going to drive race cars. And then at night, well, there'll be a little bit, people can do what they want. There's gambling. First, what has just come to mind if you're a spouse, right? It's like, you're going where? Okay. Now, let's say that the majority of the office is male. The question is, have you ever heard stories where men go on business trips and while on the flight, they take their wedding rings off? I recently spoke to an executive at the number 3 law firm in the world. And this executive was referencing what happens and said, oh, the rings come off. And I said, what? He said, you don't know, do you? And I said, what? He says, everybody knows that the men take their wedding rings off on the flight. And of course, I said, well, why did they do? Oh, what goes on in Vegas stays in. Okay. Right. That's with normal people in business suits. So sort of within the human heart, when we're away from home, when we believe that there's not the accountability, the darndest things go on. That's why the slogan, what goes on in Vegas stays in Vegas. So there's something about anonymity that will bring out the more base things. If anybody's gone on, I remember going on a business function like that. And what I saw among the other men, one of whom I knew fairly well, it's like, you're what? What are you doing? I had to pull him aside saying, do you remember that you're married? Okay. Again, normal businessmen. So now we have a convention.
Right.
And a convention that's focused on what? Adults who want to play dress up. So it's not business, but this is now their activity of choice. And think about adults who are playing dress up. Now, there's adults that do historical reenactment. I understand that. I've gone to those. And when you go to those, they're in character, but they can tell you the history of the battle. If you go to a Civil War reenactment, they will tell you everything about that era. They can tell you the generals. They can tell you the movement of the troops. If you go to Gettysburg, once a year, they have that battle.
Right.
Okay. So those are adult actors that are in character. We understand that. But when you watch those, they aren't sleeping around with everybody under the sun. They're there. They're very specific and they're highly attuned to history and they want to help educate. Right. And it's very open. But when it has to do with filling a convention center with almost 10,000 rooms that sell out within 24 hours, this is something different then. That means there's a huge eagerness to put out a lot of money to do what? To go and dress up. Now, these are adults, and a lot of them are men. So if men in business suits that you can readily identify them have a tendency to take wedding rings off in the best of situations, what about men who aren't on their days off playing tennis, aren't helping at the local soup kitchen? Mm-hmm. They are playing dress up. So number one, we'll say these are developmentally stuck individuals who like to hide their identity and are very eager to put out a lot of money to go to a convention. What do you think might be going on?
Well, they're all incognito. None of them can be identified.
And when you hide identities, it affords not only the most base of desires that come out, but does anybody really know who's under those costumes?
No, no one does, and the behavior indicates that. Though in the book I don't focus a lot on behavior, I do think it's important to note. And at these conferences, just about anything goes because of the fact these are people whose identities are hidden. They're in a costume. And I outline in the book some of the things that go on now. And I don't remember which hotel chain it was, due to what's gone on in their conferences in the past. I'm pretty sure it was that they're banned from it's I don't know where to find it in the book quickly, but I think it's the Marriott they're actually banned from.
Was that the one where they created all sorts of property damage as well?
Yeah, there was, I forget what the money, the monetary damage was to a Marriott hotel in, I think, Seattle. No, don't quote me on that because
But there was actual, that's right, there was actual damage.
Right. But things go on, like you talk about these men in costumes and this, that, and the other. Well, since they're really taking on the human identity, quite prevalent in the furry movement is crinkling. Okay.
That's right. Describe that.
Crinkling is when the furries wear depends. Because of course, if you're not really
diaper,
human,
they're wearing diapers,
right? Well, you know, so if you're really an animal, you don't use the toilet, right? So they have what they call crinkling, where they wear depends under their uniforms, and then at this particular hotel, they were taking their loaded depends off and throwing them on car windshields. Okay.
which also means they're taking them off. Paul, here is a post by someone. I don't know this person. It's on my page now. They brought it to my attention. Let me read this. At the Vernal Equinox Furry how do you Vernal Equinox? Okay, in a hotel in Canada last month, people are accidentally walking into one of the rooms. They got the wrong room number. So what's it say? Yo, what?
Yeah.
Oh, you brought what?
Yeah.
Oops. So this is a screenshot of people that attended this vernal equinox, or vernal equinox, and they reveal what was going on in there?
Right.
An orgy.
Right. And so there was a movement called the Burned Furs. It was an attempt to, and I have in my book the letters that were sent by furries who were part of the minority naive. I have copies of letters that were sent to one of the founders. I think his last name was Marino, something like that, Morano or Marino. But they sent the co-founders of the furry movement letters complaining that in one case, in one of the earlier conferences, a couple of furries got on an elevator. In fact, it was a guy that I think brought his friend to a furry conference to show him how cool it was. And they got on an elevator, and there was a furry in the elevator masturbating. So, and this goes way back. I talk in the book about the very first conferences that were in with sci-fi conferences, and I think Brad mentioned that. Even those conferences had rooms where they sold, books and stuff about furries. That was all totally saturated with, 90% of the publications in those rooms and magazines and stuff were porn.
Yeah.
Now here's the thing. It's artwork, right? So
okay, so we're under the
how
furry.
they get around a lot of the pornography laws and stuff. The fact that a lot of it's art,
There we go. So,
drawings rather
Paul-
than actual pictures.
Paul, what you've just referenced is, and this is what people might think of. Okay, the Fox and the Hound, and what Disney. Oh gosh, look at all this. So we could just bring up all sorts of pictures here. Okay, we're under Wikipedia. That's right. They've got all these pop-up things here.
Right.
Okay, so when people think of the furry fandom, okay, first of all, there we go. This is a big deal, right? I mean, we got all sorts of large groups. Okay, we could just, here's anthropomorphic, right? So it's a pretty good article. We've got Omaha the Cat Dancer. Okay, so some people may think, well, come on, this is just drawings. But again, what we want parents to understand is where there is anonymity and when there is sexual deviance, you will attract predators, because deviance moves, or porn and deviance moves in a direction, and eventually it desires to defile and mar and scar innocence. So predators look for ways of accessing kids. And so under the guise of these different cartoons, we have, there's Watership Down, what Brad mentioned. So I recommend people go on, to Wikipedia under Furry Fandom. Now, what I want people to see is this. Watch your eyes, be mindful. I'm scrolling down for a moment. We're going to talk about the sexual aspects. Now, what I want people to see is the two last paragraphs. I'm going to read them. So there was a survey, at a convention, thousands of people. As a matter of fact, 4,300 respondents. So along with everything else, these developmentally stock people that are playing dress up, there's 4,300 that actually took the time to respond. We have this. In 2013, this is 10 years ago, found that 96% of the male furry respondents reported viewing furry pornography. Okay, this is almost 100%.
Right.
Of the male respondents. And that's going to be key because, Paul, if you're willing, I'm going to have you stay around because we're going to get into more of the concerning deviance, the aspects of that in part 2. And we're going to show you how many sex offenders have been busted in this. Okay, right. So they've been viewing furry pornography compared with 78% of the females. So number one, you got 3/4 of the females looking at furry porn. Males estimate 51% of all furry art they view as pornographic, compared with 30%. So you see the difference, male and female. But this means half of the men not only access it, but they consider it, that's their form of pornography. The respondents to the survey had a slight preference for pornographic furry art over non-pornographic art. Okay, this shows you these guys are warped, and anybody accessing porn, but this is their form of pornography. 17.1% of the males reported that they viewed pornography, that when they viewed pornography, it was exclusively or nearly exclusively furry porn, and only about 5% of that pornography was the top, 5% was the top factor. Now, look at this next quote, or this next paragraph. An anonymous survey conducted by a furry research center. That's important to know. There's a research center. Why? Because the furry community has employed tactics to try to tell parents this is a safe activity for kids. And you want to see the online deviants go nuclear, you simply suggest this, that parents, furries is not safe for minors. And you will be attacked. Let me go on and read it. And then on part 2, we're going to define what these are and show you how debased this is. So found that 17% of the respondents identified as zoophiles. That is the rebranding of bestiality. So 17%. An early survey conducted in 1997 to 98 reported that about 2%. So from 97 to 2008, that's a 10-year jump. It goes from 2% to 17%, and this was 10 years ago. We're into bestiality. And less than 1% plush folia, whatever, sexually aroused by stuffed animals. I've had guys in sex offender treatment. I have 3 sex offender treatment groups right now. That's guys that masturbate to little stuffed animals. They're into heinous stuff by that time. Okay.
In the very earliest conferences, I cite in my book a Q&A on one of the earlier conferences where plushophilia, it's called, was a big thing early in the movement, having sex with stuffed animals.
And if a guy's that's right. If a guy's having sex with stuffed animals, I can tell you what he's doing out also based upon my 14 years of sex offender treatment.
So those statistics that you just cited, chapter 6, I get into the studies, okay? And I can tell you those statistics cited in Wikipedia are way low, all right? I cite 4 studies in chapter 6 that are quite eye-opening. Another point that I make in the book, let's say that the argument that it's only a small percentage of furries are only participating in, say, plushophilia. Well, the only problem is with splitting up the pie that way. In the Furrie Fandom movement, the fake fandom movement, you have such a different plethora of ill behavior that if 1 to 2% of the movement are only involved in that behavior, well, so what? There's so many of these different deviant behaviors. Now you're talking about the whole pie.
There we go. Right. Paul, that's a point. Unfortunately, we're up against the clock. Let's stop right here because we're going to pick up at this point. Parents need to stay tuned for part 2 because we're going to actually hear from, in recorded form, we're going to hear from someone that was very involved, came out, he gives up the goods. And then we're going to look at screenshots of what these people say and do online. And then we're going to look at how many sex offenders have been found within the furry fandom, because this is a very dangerous movement because it provides the perfect cover and therefore perfect access to kids. Brad, who would guess that what supposedly looks like a fun, innocent little thing is actually the perfect opportunity for very dangerous and deviant individuals to gain direct access?
Right.
There's a lot to come. Part 2 will be very compelling as well. This is Unmasking the Trans Movement, all about furries today with John Euler and Paul Dohse and myself. I want you to check us out on BitChute. You can also find us at our own website at unmaskingthetransmovement.com. All of our episodes are there. You can like, share, subscribe, comment, and don't forget to sign up to become a member where you, as parents and grandparents, can learn so much about what's going on, not only in your schools, but also in your bedrooms, and, well, now, as the furries have taken over, in the bushes, too. I'm Brad Wilder. Remember, it's not our kids' fight, it's our fight, and I'll see you next time.